If you worked with some amazing people, from design to product to growth, from startups to large enterprises, you probably got to see how they've turned their ideas into innovations, their improvements to best practices, and create a repeatable winning formula. Hi, I'm Pradeep, and welcome to the Three Keys podcast, where I talk with creators, builders, growers, people that keep reinventing themselves. This podcast focuses on the lessons they've learned along the way and boil them down to three keys they credit for their success. Hey, Kathryn, good afternoon. Thank you for your time again. Always great speaking with you. You are one of the experts I always turn to when it comes to talking about digital transformation. You have a ton of experience across multiple industries, and I have to ask in that regard, uh, what is the key, or what are the three keys to disrupting digital transformation, according to you?
Well, thank you, Pradeep, for having me. And that's my favorite topic. So you just stop me when you've heard enough. But so there's two different things. So digital transformation is sort of the process of really looking at your organization, your company, and saying, what can the newer technologies out there enable us to do that we couldn't have done before? Are there some whole new businesses to be in, or some whole new business models that we could use to deliver our old business, but in a new way? And so that's the transformation piece. But one of the things you asked about was disruption, and that's the key to transformation. That's the key to how fast do you go, how soon do you do it, how important is it to really do a transformation? Because all companies will do some sort of digitization. Well, they will find something that can be digitized, and there's great value and ROI in doing it. For example, automating your lighting so that it automatically shuts off when no one's in the room. Saves a lot of money. No, why light the room when no one's in it? This is a digitization of something that we used to do with a switch, right? Super important, and why not? Let's do that. But is that transforming my company? Is that changing the way I really deliver value to my customers? That's not yet, right? It might be a small piece of it, because that savings of that gives me, on aggregate with other little savings I might get from a bunch of little digital initiatives, that might allow me to free up capital to do something really transformational. But disruption is really what's fueling it. So if you look at one of the core things you need to focus on when undergoing a digital transformation is you have to know what a disruption really is. Because you have to ask yourself, am I going to be a disruptor? Or is there a disruptor that's causing me to change? And so you have to recognize what that is. So there's three things that in the world of digital that a true disruptor does. And I'll give you the challenge I give everybody. If you can tell me a high-flying startup that didn't do these three things, then you will be the first one. But every real disruptor digitally has combined these three things. So they are cost value, experience value, and platform value. And so you might be going, yeah, I get it. Cost, okay, lower cost experience. We know what that is in the platform. But I want you to think digital. So cost in the world of digital isn't about lowering the cost. It is underneath it all, but it's also the digital capabilities around cost. So this would be things like consumption-based pricing, cost transparency, reverse auctions, right? Buyer aggregation. The most important thing about the cost element of a disruptor is that they fundamentally change the cost value of the product or service they deliver. And they do it by giving the consumer a piece of the action. So it's one thing to say, I'm going to use technology to totally lower the cost of production or lower the way I deliver this product. But if the consumer doesn't get anything out of it, other than a lower cost, you don't have that magic, right? So these days, and we can thank the millennials for this, right? Because they've showed us that they're pretty easy to figure out. They want something for it. If I'm going to post a photo of your restaurant, a great meal at your restaurant, or I'm going to post on social media my new outfit in the fitting room when I'm trying it on, or like something. I want something. I want reward points. I want a piece of it. I want a return. And so one of the really important things about the cost pillar is that you fundamentally change the cost value and you give the consumer a piece of the action. When you get selfish and you don't give it back, that's when it doesn't work.
So that's the part where you're not only improving or creating efficiencies in your operations, you're actually changing the business model, you're changing the customer engagement model. So is that sort of the difference between, let's say, a marginal digitization policy versus disrupting, your business to reinvent yourself?
It's all of that, and it's setting you up to scale. Because if you think about anything where the consumer gets a piece of the action, that's your scale. Mm-hmm. That's when things go viral. That's when things go, right? So that's why that's a really important component. Now, why this is under the bucket of things I couldn't do without the technology before. Maybe I thought about that in the old days, but it was really hard to give the consumer a payback or a role, right, in this cost structure because it was very manual. With technology, giving somebody a reward or a piece or visibility, whatever that is that they need, it's so much easier now in the digital world. So that's something digital has allowed. So let's talk about the middle one, the second one, the experience value. Okay, this is where a true disruptor fundamentally changes the experience. And we're probably most familiar with the technologies here because we've all had some exposure to an experience that has been significantly changed. And so there are things like, digital signage, mobile apps, AI technologies, things like Waze, the wayfinding where you're interacting, right. And the more you interact, the more, value there is to the whole platform. We know about personalization. So one-to-one, really using data to respond and give you a unique experience. But this is about less friction, lower latency, being accommodating of any device in any time in any way that you want. So the experience is really important, that it fundamentally uses all of the technologies out there for engagement. So that's the second area that a true disruptor will check the box on. The third one is about
if you don't mind me asking, you've been on sort of the retail side of the house and you've been on the healthcare side of the house, right? So when it comes to delivering experience value, both industries are different because of the regulatory constraints on the healthcare side, but which industry do you think has caught up or has a long way to go?
So yeah, I think you knew the answer when you asked that question. But if I compare retail and healthcare, they have had very different journeys in the experience, digital experience, and for obvious reasons. So healthcare always believed, rightly so, that the product or the service they provided was really a human to human experience. And how the heck do you digitize that, right? For a long time, it was thought, oh, you can't replace that. This is a doctor and a patient or a nurse and a patient. And they do some things, they might give you a shot or do a physical exam. Those things can't be digitized. That was the old thinking. Whereas retail, for many, many years, has adopted digital interaction with the customer, whether it's the payment system or online e-commerce. And now moving into things like curbside pickup and personalized offers that use your buying history to offer recommendation engines and things like that. So they're just more mature in terms of doing that. Healthcare is now seeing that you can build a relationship, and there are parts of the healthcare journey that can be done contactless. And we've all seen that, with the pandemic. But even parts of healthcare like, physical therapy. Even through the pandemic, I heard people saying, oh, you can't digitize physical therapy. They're going to have to wait until pandemic's over. But if you really break down the process of a physical therapy experience or set of sessions, you can digitize part of it. You can certainly do an intake. You can certainly, a PT can do an eval by putting the camera on you and saying, walk across the room. Now I need you to bend your knees. I need you to bring a chair and sit down. And they're looking at your posture and your gait and your balance. Those things can be done with high quality video. And you can even get to the manipulation and the exercise that's very hands-on by having a family member join in the session with the PT, directing that person. So they're getting good at what retail has always done, which is break down the journey and let's see where I can insert a digital touch point and really create value.
Cool. Yeah, and there are two sides to the story, right? Which is one, a startup that is building a platform that offers that sort of experience, but how far can they go? What do they build? How exactly do they determine value versus, let's say, a health system? How do they determine value to an inpatient? So, what's your advice to, let's say, both entities on how they should think about a patient, and then how they could actually work together to jointly be the disruptor in, let's say, a patient journey?
That's a really good question. So you're sort of differentiating between a digital native, a company that is founded, uses technology to go into a space and reinvent that space. And
Right, because the space is ripe for disruption.
Right, like Uber, right?
It's like Uber.
Transportation for hire has been around forever, or the taxi industry, whatever you want to call it, transportation for hire. And the process was very laborious and very not customer friendly. And so they looked at every step of that process and said, what digital capabilities exist today that didn't exist before? And can I put all these together to do what I just described? And I haven't gotten to the third one yet, but I fundamentally changed the cost of the transportation for hire service. I fundamentally changed the experience, right? Because it's mobile. I'm not waiting on the curb. The guy hasn't shown up. Now I got to run in the house, unlock the door again, call the taxi company again, and come back out. There's so many digital touch points that make that really seamless. But the third one is the platform value. And I haven't talked about that, and because I'm talking about Uber, I'll mention it. So the third thing a disruptor does, in addition to cost and experience, is they provide a platform value. And by this, again, think digital. I don't mean, your hardware platform or your server farm in the back. I mean the digital platform. So this is things like marketplace, crowdsourcing, peer-to-peer, the sharing economy, this idea that you and I may each have a little something that's not worth much on its own, but if we put our little somethings together, we might actually make a market. So think Airbnb, right? You've got an extra room, I've got a guest house. If suddenly we were digitally connecting all of this, we can make a lodging industry, couldn't we? Right? And so it's about putting the platform, the digital platform, in the hands of the consumer, and they will tell you what they want to do with it. They will show you what they want to do. So digital natives will go out sometimes with something they think is what the market wants, but immediately, like in a nanosecond, thousands, if not millions of people respond and say, no, here's what I want. And Uber's a good example, because once Uber went to market with this great digitized way of doing transportation for hire, they started to notice some behaviors. And one of these marketplace or sharing economy kind of things emerged. And that was the minute people got in their Uber ride, they realized they had one of those little things that on its own maybe didn't have value, but if we put them together, it had value. And you probably see where I'm going with this. It was called the seat next to you. So if the seat next to me is constantly empty, why couldn't I have the driver, stop by and pick up Pradeep? He's going the same place I am. And then Pradeep and we're going to split the fare. You don't worry, you just drive, we're going to split the fare. Well, so if Uber can watch this behavior and see more and more people our drivers are pulling over and making a stop. What is this? What's going on here? We can build this into our app. We can create a new feature called Uber Share or Ride Share, whatever we want to call it. The point is If they had done that and said, hey, every time somebody adds a passenger, we're going to get a better deal. We're going to charge as much and we're going to get a better deal. It wouldn't have flown. So you go back to the cost, experience, and platform. They lowered the cost, but they gave you a piece of the action and me a piece of the action. Or otherwise we wouldn't do it again, as much as I like you, right?
So for every feature, they went back to the three keys, the same thing, the cost and the experience and the platform.
Yeah. Yeah. And so
is that where a lot of companies fail in, not going back to all three, even if, in their mind. So the Uber share, as you rightly mentioned, it's not just another feature. It's not just another way you ride, but it's another way that Uber rethought their entire business model. And so for that, they went back to the cost, like you said, the cost value and the experience value. Is that where a lot of companies fail, where they think, this is just an incremental feature, so we don't need to, start from scratch. We don't need to rethink the business model entirely. It's just, plus one.
Yeah, that is where a lot of them fail. They also, so go back to your earlier question of somebody who's not a digital native, who's maybe a hospital that's been around for years that's trying to digitally transform. How do they do that? There are some very fundamental steps. The first thing that enabled a company like Uber to be responsive to that behavior they started seeing was their platform was digital. They saw how many times drivers were pulling over or how many times this different behaviors were happening. And they could then bring it in and say, okay, team, here's what's happening. Is there an opportunity here to give a service to people that they clearly want and make a little more money or create a better experience? And so when they looked at that as an opportunity, they went through what they always did with digital natives, is assess what's in it for them, what's in it for us, what can the technology deliver here. And if you're a hospital or somebody like that, you may not have the digital platform to even be responsive. How do you know how many people showed up, didn't get what they wanted and left? Same in retail. How many people went through the register and you think, oh, they bought more than they did last week. But you don't know about the 50 things that were out of stock that they didn't get and they went over to another retailer to get. You don't see that behavior unless you have a digital capability. So it starts with having the platform there, digitally, some foundational things to be a sensing, learning kind of company, and then having the agility to say, I'm gonna ignore that, or I'm gonna build it myself, or I'm gonna partner with it. And that's sort of how you create the portfolio of digital initiatives that lead you into transforming your business.
This is great. I mean, nobody has actually broken it down into these three simple, yet when put together, you go, that sort of light bulb moment. And your definition of digital native is spot on. I think that clearly shows us the distinction and how both parties can work together. One last question, if I may. When it's late is late, right? But at what point should the companies, should the legacy companies go, if I don't act now, we're done. The door is shut, right? So what's the gating factor beyond which it's just it's just a cliff and they're going to fall off? It's only a matter of time.
Well, I think we can look back over the last 5, 7, 8 years and see some who haven't transformed quickly enough, and they have fallen off the radar. And yet we've also seen some who have poured their hearts into digital and still haven't made it. So it is a delicate balance of knowing where the real value is. And all good digital transformations, in my opinion, start with a real assessment of digital value. And digital value, like I've tried to say when I talked about those three things that at first glance appear to be something, of course, we know, they're really different when you talk about it in a digital term. And so really looking at value, that helps you figure out where you can get an immediate impact, and keeping an eye on disruptors gives you the sort of the metrics, sort of the, what's the word I'm looking for, the meter to say, do I need to do this now or can it wait a quarter or a year? And disruptors will appear, and what you've got to do is recognize them by those three components. Is this a real disruptor or is this just some fluky thing that's going to come and go? And if they've got those three things and you know they're a real disruptor, then you got to pay attention to what part of your business they're impacting. So in healthcare, you look at things like the chain drug retailers like CVS, Walgreens, that used to be chain drug retail stores who are now healthcare providers, and you start to take notice that they truly are disrupting healthcare. They truly are taking part of my business. So do I want to partner with them? Do I want to try to build what they've got? Very difficult. Or do I want to ignore it and kind of think they're going to have their space and I'm going to have mine? And that's where the real, strategic thinking has to come into it.
Well, great insights, Kathryn. As always, I always walk away with, a new lesson, a new way of looking at things, a new way of thinking about, a company, their strategy, their journey, and all the stakeholders involved. And today is no different. So thank you as always. Love speaking with you. We'll catch up soon.
Likewise. Thanks for having me.
I hope you enjoyed listening and learning from them as I did. If you'd like to share your feedback, or if you think I should interview somebody that you worked with in the past, please reach out to me on Twitter @ppaniari. Until next time.